I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, were 4 faculty deaths at Southern University at New Orleans over a 3-month period non-related, or did they have something to do with moldy conditions in the same building they all worked in? A media investigation looked into that question, as well as some organizational issues at the university. We'll discuss SUNO tonight. We'll also look at the latest in the fall elections, which are 3 months from today, and our Future Watch segment will ask about plans for the Audubon Zoo. We will begin, however, with last night's tragic news from Lafayette, including the politics of gun laws. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Stephanie Grace, columnist, the New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Jed Lipinski, reporter, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. We're going to go over to Errol first to talk about last night's tragic shooting in Lafayette, Louisiana, at a movie theater where 3 people, including the shooter, lost their lives.
Yeah, 3 thoughts come to mind, well, 3 among many. But one, just if you're watching television last night, how amazingly it is how everything comes together so quickly, especially in terms of television. This was television story, and how quickly a nationwide network formed, and people were able to be on the scene and get interviews and do all the remote interviews, and so it's very impressive. But also the same way that all the police forces came together. I mean, when you saw those shots of all those blinking lights outside the theater, none of those people who drive those cars were expecting for there to be trouble at night, and yet it all came together. And by all accounts, it seems like, from what we know so far, the police did a very good job in handling it. And from what I saw of the press coverage, everybody was properly cautious in relaying the facts. And it could be that they all have so much experience from watching other people doing it now that it's almost going to be a playbook on how to handle these things. But it was television story. I thought overall they did a good job with it. The other thought I have, and Stephanie, I'd be curious about your thoughts on this, is Governor Jindal. You know, it's been common when you have a big event, a bigger tragedy, for a governor to go and be on the scene, and so that's not unusual. Jindal was probably thankful he wasn't in Iowa last night.
What were the odds? I mean, usually he is these days.
But this wasn't his story. I mean, he's good when there's a hurricane coming, a tropical event, because then you're talking about government agencies, you're talking about evacuation plans, you're talking about lots of moving parts going in different directions. Here, there really wasn't anything to say. I mean, he said the predictable, that he asked the police, the state police, to give full support. State police would have done that anyway.
Right.
The main thing he talked about was urging people to pray. Well, that's a private decision that people make, and they really don't need to consult the governor about whether or not to pray. And so there really wasn't anything for him to say other than to just be there. And now maybe that was comforting to some people.
It may have been. It also, he took some grief for it online, I should say, for getting there very quickly when it was a live television story, and it was really still a crime scene. So, normally you don't have the governor give that press conference, you usually have law enforcement. Also that he did urge people to pray and was trying to, bring people together and say very comforting words. Of course, he is very opposed to gun control, so there were people saying, you know what, we can actually talk about guns in this situation, it's time we do. So, and that's kind of an ongoing frustration with a lot of people who have watched these shootings over and over again and seen people like Governor Jindal accuse them of politicizing it if they bring that up. So, there's some subtext to it. But he was in Baton Rouge, so he did get there quickly. So.
I did read one observation that it did put him on a platform, exposed him nationally, more so than perhaps he ordinarily would have been.
Right.
And this could actually give him a boost.
And again, if you remember, he's kind of at his best, even though this isn't a management situation, he still kind of does very well in these command and control situations historically. He looks in charge, he is up on the statistics and can, in the past kind of has a record of being reassuring, and, he did get all over national TV last night, and obviously that was not the main thing going on, but it is something that happened.
But the whole gun control thing was really the next thought, because it happened that President Obama last night had done an interview with BBC. Now, it was before this incident happened, from what I understand. But he said that, he was asked, what frustrates you most? And he says, well, in fact, that what frustrates him the most is here we are, we have this big, powerful industrial nation, and yet we can't really get a handle of doing anything effective on gun control regulation.
And it's interesting, you kind of are having Democrats start to talk about that again after not really, I think, losing their nerve, will, feeling like they were just hitting a brick wall for a while. Certainly after Sandy Hook, there was a move thinking, okay, all these children were killed. This is going to break through. We're actually going to get some really very moderate gun control was proposed. And the NRA was able to push that back. And there really hasn't been much movement since then. But it's interesting, the president has been through these situations over and over. I mean, can you imagine what it's like to have to keep having to go out and come for the nation? And also Hillary Clinton's talking about it, I should say.
What tends to happen is we've had 3 mass shooting situations in the last couple of months across the country. And it used to be when one of these things would happen, people would say, well, man, somebody's going to do something about gun control. But actually, what's happened is that they galvanize opinions in 2 different directions.
Yeah. I think the one opinion that keeps coming forward that you don't see anything happening with either is mental health. And you've heard in all of these cases that there are people with a history of mental health problems. This gentleman, in fact, was denied a gun permit several years ago, so we don't know how he got this gun yet.
And law enforcement in different communities that he's lived in, they were very aware of him, that he was,
right. So
potential trouble.
The mental health angle isn't being talked about as much. I think it's a harder fix, probably.
It is.
I would think so. But the people who are opposed to any type of gun regulation, they say, well, this is not proof that we need new laws. This is proof that we need guns because we need to defend ourselves. The people
the movie theater was already a gun-free zone, so he was already violating a law that existed there, right?
But then on the other side, you have all the people saying we are the only industrialized country that keeps having these situations, and clearly something's going on here.
And you'd think this being a gubernatorial election year, that this will become an issue. I don't think it will, because for there to be an issue, there needs to be people disagreeing on different sides, and all of the candidates, you think it would be on the same side, and that'll be supportive of it.
The Democrat John Bel Edwards advertises that he is very pro-gun. He's very much a First Amendment guy, Second Amendment guy, excuse me. So.
But in terms of this incident that did happen last night, this tragic incident, and you sort of refer to it, Errol, it did seem to be handled quite efficiently, with law enforcement actually moving into the theater while gunfire was still being heard.
Well, unfortunately, this has happened enough. I think what happened in Colorado got especially the big chains thinking about procedures. So there were procedures. There was alarm procedures. I think police have had training into what to do. And so, and then they followed the rules and did a good job.
And also what they were saying is, this guy had disguises. He had an escape plan, and what seemed to have happened is he went out with a crowd and he saw that there were cops there, went back in and took his own life. So it really, could have ended very differently if they had not been right there.
But once again, very tragic. 2 young women just starting out in their lives tragically ended. How many people? 9 people known to be wounded, and then of course there are 2 teachers who are being hailed as heroes for setting off the fire alarm to try to get help there. So, but unfortunately now Louisiana's on the list of having one of these incidents happen. All right, Errol, thanks. I'm going to go over to Jed now. And you had a series this week in the Times-Picayune, it's on of course, NOLA.com as well, about how there were 4 SUNO faculty members who died within 3 months of one another last year, and they all had occupied offices in the same building, which had a mold problem. So what did you find out?
Yes, that's true. Basically, this story began with Hurricane Katrina, which damaged SUNO worse than any other university in town. 4.5 feet of water were inside this particular building called the Multi-Purpose Building. After the storm, they moved everyone off the park campus to temporary trailers that were provided by FEMA on what was called the Lake Campus, where there are still some buildings. And
So these the faculty members, ultimately they were in these temporary buildings on the Lake Campus, closer to the lake, and then they were moved back to this multi-purpose building. This was in 2008 when finally they were able to move back. The key issue here is nobody was denying the fact that there was mold in the building, but it was supposedly remediated. Was it?
It was. So they moved people back in the fall of 2008. And when they made that announcement, the faculty and staff members who were moved back in there said, this building does not seem safe to us. It looked dirty. Some people said that it still had that distinct smell of Hurricane Katrina, which a
Anybody
lot
was
of
here at that
people
time
recognized.
yeah.
So regardless, they were moved back in, and there were various rumors, unsubstantiated, as to why that was. Within a matter of 2 or 3 months, people started complaining of coughing, wheezing, asthma symptoms. People didn't feel right, they felt nauseous, and there were about 12 people who reported this to the vice president of the faculty senate, who was outspoken and had tenure and was able to communicate their complaints to the administration, but unfortunately the administration did not seem to react very well to these complaints.
But the building was remediated, and they said that they did not, this is the Suno administration, they did not let anybody occupy that building again until the state signed off on it, because the state was involved in this too.
Right. So a remediation was performed in the summer of 2008. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that first, after which people were moved in. And then regardless of that full remediation that was performed by a company that worked for other state universities and had performed similar remediations at UNO, for example, they went in and they said, it's all clear. But when they put people back into this building, they thought, no, it's not.
People were having some sort of physical reactions to it. So what you found in your reporting, these 4 individuals all passed away within a 3-month period of one another, and they had all been on the same floor, occupied offices in the same floor in this building. But does science say that there is a direct link to mold causing fatalities? Has science found that?
Right. So the evidence that the CDC and the EPA have is that they have yet to establish a direct connection between exposure to different mold contaminants like Stachybotrys, which is a popular one, otherwise known as black mold or toxic mold, which a lot of people were talking about after Hurricane Katrina. Haven't established a direct link to the causes of death, which in this case were breast cancer recurrence, heart disease, and a pulmonary embolism, which is a blockage of an artery in the lungs. However, leading mold experts around the country who've studied this claim that there is a connection between mold exposure and something called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which can lead to and exacerbate breast cancer recurrence, heart disease, pulmonary embolism. All these things are fairly common in people who are exposed to mold and who experience this chronic inflammation.
And maybe had some pre-existing conditions in some sort of way.
Exactly.
Could exacerbate it.
Exactly.
So what are family members saying now? Families of those who have died, are they demanding more answers, or are they pursuing anything?
So one of the family members of a woman named Dr. Leary, who died on Suno's campus, that was a story that just came out this morning. She actually collapsed in another building on campus of what some people thought was an asthma attack. And she lost consciousness and never regained consciousness, and she was taken off life support 4 days later. Her daughter has filed a lawsuit against the university. That was back in March. It's still pending.
Okay, and that's one of the reasons why, it was because there was no defibrillator there.
No defibrillator. The fire alarms didn't work.
Yeah.
The nurse was not in her office. Fortunately, a lot of students at Suno are registered nurses, and 3 people performed CPR on her while she was unconscious on the ground.
Now the building is being torn down?
So this building has been marked for demolition. It's uncertain whether or when it will be knocked down, but the state, FEMA, approved it for demolition. The state Office of Facility Planning and Control has said, yes, we'd like to now demolish this building and build another building in its place.
So it's boarded up, nobody's using it now?
It's locked. When I was there 3 months ago, I walked right into the auditorium with a photographer.
But you also mentioned in your story that the memorial service for these 4 people was held in the same building on the same floor where they worked.
It was. I'm not sure exactly why that was. People found it ironic. And when Victor U. Polo, who's the chancellor of Southern University in New Orleans, showed up, a lot of people held him responsible for not acting faster, and people got upset and some people left.
But we should say that the university has responded saying that they make sure that everyone is taken care of.
Yes.
Safe conditions.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that earlier. Suno did give me a statement that said that they would not have put people in that building if they had not believed it to be safe. And it was given approval by the state facility
by the state.
planning.
All right. A good series. If you want to read the series, it's on NOLA.com. You can find it there. Okay, Jed, thanks a lot. All right.
Lighter note.
Yes, definitely a lighter note. What are they axing, as Errol wrote, over at the zoo?
Well, at the zoo, a lot of favorites have been kind of off display for a while they get new habitats. Among them, the elephants, the orangutans, and the sea lions. And all of that is getting ready to change. The orangutans have been moved. They are going to where the elephants used to be, which is as you walk into the zoo, you get to a fountain, and right to your right, you'll be able to see the orangutans climbing much higher than before. I'm told the orangutans will actually be able to see boats on the Mississippi River from their new habitat. So all of this is partly to improve habitats for the animals, but also to make the Asian area truly Asia, put all the animals in their right places. Lots of capital improvements. Sea lion pool needed a new filtration system and some other things. The sea lions should be back out on display, I'm told, in weeks. Orangutans sometime this fall, and the elephants sometime in 2016. All this while the zoo, the financials for 2014 came out just this week, and the zoo operates at a deficit. It does every year. It has for a while. I'm told that's because these animals are very, very expensive to care for. So zoos around the country are looking for ways to increase revenue, get families to stay longer, and Audubon has come up with a plan that's been quite successful. That's the Cool Zoo. They looked around New Orleans, and it's hot. Their visitorship is way, 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 way down in the summertime, and now it's way, way, way up because they have the Cool Zoo, and this summer opened a lazy river, which takes about 7 minutes to get around, has a couple of sandy beaches, and next year that is going to change even more so that it will feel like you're more part of the zoo. The elephant's new habitat will back up to the Cool Zoo, and between a glass wall will be the human pool and the elephant pool. So the humans and the elephants can apparently feel like they're playing together in the water. So all that is changing, and I'm told way back on the drawing board there might even be a wave pool. So it's really turned into a water park within the zoo, and those kind of things are helping the zoo to balance its books so they can bring in even more animals. They just got a new frog exhibit. They're changing an Asian discovery trail to really make it feel like you're walking into Southeast Asia. One thing that Audubon is getting back online, that finally, since after Hurricane Katrina, the Nature Center in New Orleans East, which was devastated, in their balance sheet has been zeros for years. Nothing's happening there. It is now under construction and should be open sometime in 2016. That's boardwalks and nature trails, and you can learn a lot. School groups go and learn a lot about our environment in Southeast Louisiana, and that is coming back. So it's progressing and changing with new exhibits, new animals. Another new thing they did this year, which apparently has been popular, but mostly with tourists, not locals who don't want to go out in the heat quite yet, is a ropes course, which is actually a 4-story high kind of trust adventure course with ropes where you can overlook the whole zoo, see on top of the giraffes, and do trust exercises with the whole family. The whole idea is to find ways to get families to go and stay for longer and therefore spend more money.
Yeah, go to the shops.
Where have the elephants and the orangutans been?
They have been, the elephants have been in a back exhibit area where they come out and walk every once in a while, and folks can still see them. These elephants have been at the zoo for decades. They're old. They're 50 and 42 years old. They're still there. And the orangutans are still there, but they're just in areas where they aren't on exhibit for the average zoogoer.
So you get the best of both worlds. You get all the zoo benefits without having to have people look at them.
Exactly. But the elephants, having been there so long, when I asked about this pool setup, I said, how do you think the elephants will react to seeing the humans play? And they told me they're so used to being watched and so used to human interaction, and I think the elephants will enjoy playing.
Okay. We'll go from the zoo now, and we'll go over to Stephanie and politics.
Different kind
of zoo. Good link here. Okay, but we are in an election year, but it's so quiet right now.
It is. We're 3 months out from Election Day already. It kind of feels like this race has been going on the governor's race at least, has been going on for a while, but nothing's really changed. And we're about, I guess, we're a little away from qualifying. That's right after Labor Day, so that's when we'll hit, we'll be in sprint mode. But until then, I think a lot of people are kind of holding their powder. David Vitter, of course, has tons of money in his account in his super PAC. He's not spending it on advertising yet. There's been very little advertising, so for, there's some internet advertising, but on television, where people usually get to know the candidates a little, there really hasn't been much. No TV debates yet. There have been some forums before interest groups. So, but the field is pretty set. We have the 3 Republicans and the 1 Democrat, John Bel Edwards. Still some talk of some other people getting in. It just seems less and less likely. So, at this point, the question is, does anything upset the dynamic of David Vitter being kind of the juggernaut and John Bel Edwards getting into a runoff with him as the lone Democrat, and basically having David Vitter be the overwhelming favorite in the runoff? And, Jay Darden's trying. Jay Darden had a petition drive that he put up the other day basically saying, sign here if you want to demand that Bobby Jindal pay back the money that we're spending on his out-of-state security. Really, everybody is running kind of almost against Governor Jindal as much as they're running against each other. That dynamic hasn't changed either.
And what about Lieutenant Governor's race?
Lieutenant Governor also a set field at this point. John Young is very successful, parish president of Jefferson Parish, very successful fundraising. He actually had Carly Fiorina stop by his fundraiser the other day because she was in town for one of her fundraisers, and his significant other, Julie Quinn, the former state senator, kind of got her over. So that was kind of an endorsement. Billy Nungesser is still out there fighting, the former Plaquemines Parish president. Kip Holden, the Baton Rouge mayor, a big name Democrat, the only Democrat, not raising a lot of money. Albert Guillory, the kind of unusual figure in the state because he's the black Republican who, also doesn't have a lot of money but is very quotable, so he gets a lot of free media. He actually had a very amusing gig on The Daily Show a couple years ago. Remember the chicken boxing? He was the chicken boxing guy, and then J.P. Morrell was the anti-chicken boxing guy, and they got some great national publicity for Louisiana there.
I remember that one. Stephanie, look it up. It's good.
One of the things that's happening is that, campaigns are so expensive, and I think we're getting away from the long public campaign period that we used to. I mean, we don't have candidates going around and having rallies and country music and watermelon and all that kind of stuff. No. And it's really kind of intense to the last few weeks.
Right.
In terms of the public campaigning, I mean, behind the scenes campaigning.
And it's moved much more to television, obviously, and the internet now. I mean, there are videos, viral videos are really important if you can, and very cheap actually. So if you can kind of put up a video that gets people's attention and they start forwarding it, that's a way to get some momentum without raising a lot of money.
Let me have a quick touch on the Attorney General's race.
That's an interesting one. We have these sometimes in Louisiana, we have these kind of Republican on Republican races, and they end up being very interesting because the Democrats who have trouble winning statewide races are still about a 40% block, so they become the swing vote. So here we have Buddy Caldwell, the former Democrat, now Republican incumbent Attorney General, and Jeff Landry, the former Tea Party congressman, who's really getting a lot of support from the party. It looks like he's probably going to get the official party endorsement, which is not always meaningful, but he has a lot of support from his former colleagues in Congress, including Steve Scalise, the whip. He's close to David Vitter. So he has a lot of momentum, but on the other hand, are the Democrats, they might be more likely to go with Buddy Caldwell if they don't have a Democrat to vote for. So
and Buddy Caldwell was really sort of elected 4 years ago as a reaction against Charlie Fody, because of Charlie Fody's investigations.
8 years ago, actually,
Yeah, and so there was just kind of a lot of bad feeling. He came from out of nowhere.
And I don't think he kind of has a super high profile or a lot of natural support. He's been trying to pick some very conservative issues to highlight: social issues, opposition to same-sex marriage, the levee board lawsuit a little while back. But there's still some distrust, and people. I was at Washington Mardi Gras a couple of years ago, and Mary Landrieu always had this karaoke party, and Buddy Caldwell's kind of known in political circles for doing his Elvis impersonation. He gets up there and he sings, and there was a guy with an iPad filming him, and somebody pointed to him and said, "That's a Republican guy. That's a video that they're going to use against him to show that he's close to Mary Landrieu," and indeed, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be talking more about this in these months to come, I know. Now, we just have a couple of minutes, but I want you to touch really quickly, Jed, if you could. You did a piece, this was in the spring, regarding an audit that was done in a program at SUNO that had not been released. Do you know, has it been released yet, and what was it about?
Sure, the audit has not been released. It was an audit into a program called the Urban Tourism Program, Economic and Urban Tourism Program, which was run by a woman named Nicole Badgewa Ford. Nicole Badgewa Ford is the niece of former state senator Diana Badgewa. Nicole took over the job in 2003 around the same time that a $50,000 annual appropriation went through the Senate Finance Committee when Diana Badgewa was a member of that committee.
And so there was nothing that the auditor found suspect until after Katrina, and this is what the auditor was talking to you about and wondering why there had not been a release of the report. And since then, Ms. Badgewa Ford has, we should say, stepped down.
She's stepped
from
down.
the position.
Yeah, after Katrina, suddenly things, like at a lot of universities, things got mixed up, but SUNO, and especially this program, was especially complicated. The paperwork was suddenly all over the place, whereas Nicole had started out working during the day when she could be properly supervised by her supervisor there. Suddenly she switched to working at night when no one was able to supervise her. Interviews with people who worked on the same floor never actually saw her there. Things were very suspicious.
And so did the university ever give you a statement about it, talk to you about it?
Yeah, the university basically had no comment on that.
Okay. So as far as you know, this report has not been released. It's still being studied? Looked at
still being studied according to the
auditors?
Southern University system and according to SUNO. Maybe they'll release it sometime soon.
But there's been a long tradition of political involvement in SUNO. I mean, going back to the Bill Jefferson days, had a big influence there.
Well, and if you want to find out more about this is a piece that you had written in the spring, and once again, you could find it at NOLA.com and find out more about the situation that Jed had written about. But right now, we need to go to looking ahead.
Okay, bear with me on this one, okay? Saturday night, there's going to be a hurricane turning ceremony, a voodoo hurricane turning ceremony. Sally Ann Glassman, who's our local voodoo priestess, will be conducting it. And she conducts it, they actually have a little performance area between Piety and Desire near Rampart. And if you look at the number, you can get some information. It's interesting to see, don't go there to gawk or to do selfies or to, expect people eating chicken. I mean, this is a serious ritual and people take it seriously. There's a lot of interplay between Catholicism and voodoo. And so they're appealing to Our Lady of Prom-Sikar and to, I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce it, and to a voodoo spirit named Isli Dantos. Yeah. And they're kind of like two of the same.
I've been to it. It's a very interesting thing to see. And
we
need all the help we can to keep us away from hurricanes.
If you go, dress in white and wear like a red scarf or bandana.
Okay, quickly.
We don't get many big presidential events here in Louisiana, ever, certainly at this point in the campaign. But Bernie Sanders is coming this weekend, the kind of sensation on the Democratic side. He's having a rally Sunday night at the Pontchartrain Center in Kenner, open to the public. Again, Pontchartrain Center, most recently the site of Bobby Jindal's presidential announcement.
Okay, Steph, thanks. Dawn.
Sea lions will be back within the next few weeks. Go out to Audubon Zoo and look for them.
Absolutely. Jed?
You can swim in Bayou St. John. It's safe.
It's safe? Okay, well, that's good to know.
According to the Department of Environmental Quality.
Good to know in these hot days. Thanks, you guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us so much, and we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.